Hello, this is KT0 bringing the I3 commentary on Fire Island. This is a very familiar map. In fact, I think the first game I've ever casted was on Fire Island, so the memory bring back for me, and let's go right into the game, shall we? On top side of the map we have a Empire player, who knows, and a question mark. Interesting. And on the bottom side of the map we have a Soviet player whose name is RZZI, I assume, who has opened with a barrack into a refinery and he's produced several bears, walking all the way across the map, and what I just heard is conscript training finished, which means a conscript is coming out. It's not so much of a big deal because conscripts are generally weak, except when they're holding the vodka bottle, which is destructive. Yes, it's the most scary weapon of all, and the Empire player is moving his MCV as well towards this direction, seemingly, and he has deployed one of his dojos at this location, which is a choke point at the left flank of his main base, versus a orange bear sitting right in front of the dojo, trying to kill off anything that comes out of it, which is very unsuccessful because it was just crushed by one of the dojo cores. Even before that a dojo is deployed, it's already deadly. Empire, the mighty imperial forces, the power of technology. And we see the Soviet player has transitioned from one refinery into a war factory, looking for some Mac play and very pressurizing build using sickles and hammer tanks and so on and so forth. Hammer tanks, when they're in great number, they have awesome range, awesome secondary ability, and just imagine a tank that can suck out your opponent's weapon and use it as your own. How awesome is that? And a instant dojo has been deployed at this location, as you can see, very near the ore derrick here. In fact, its sole purpose is to produce an engineer to occupy the ore derricks, and one of the Imperial warriors would be eaten away by a bear there, and the Empire player was not careful with his war building. He hasn't been keeping up, so now one of the miners is going to be frozen at his main base here, and if he doesn't complete the war just yet, this Pterodon will prove to be very potent, infecting miners left and right and freezing the units annoyingly to slow down the Empire player's economy, which he can't really afford to have at the moment, since his opponent does have two refineries fully functional and his war factory as well, after producing two Pterodons to his opponent's main base, doing some good harassments, is now going to move into Tech 2, it seems, for our Soviet player. And does he really have the time for that? Because soon he is going to be asked to deal with a army of 3 Tengus, which is moving for a good harassment for the Empire player here. And this war that the Soviet player has built might prove to be of disservice of his own, since the sickle cannot attack into the walls. And well, the Empire player just seems to be returning the favor here, trying to kill off miners and delay the mining of the Soviet player as long as possible to buy him enough time to catch up in terms of economy, since he was harassed quite heavily at an earlier point of the game. And one of the Tengus even moving from a different angle here, trying to destroy another miner, and for a moment here the mining activity of the Soviet player was completely forced to a halt. So basically at this point of the game the Soviet player has no income whatsoever, and he still has to deal with these 2 pesky Tengus inside of its space, shooting away at one of the miners. And keep in mind, if this miner is a loss, you have to spend something like 1,100 resource to rebuild one, so it's quite some heavy loss here. And considering how much mining that the Empire player was able to force the Soviet player to stop, the loss of 3 Tengus was certainly justified, well, very rightly justified, since the Empire player now does have an army of 5 Tengus and 4 infantries, 4 Imperial warriors to be specific. And would it be enough though? I don't know, since now since now our Soviet player is at tier 2, so he can produce hammer tanks, and keep in mind that the Tengus do only have an anti-infantry gun, so they are not very good against the thick armor of tanks. But the Soviet player can't really afford to build many of the hammer tanks since his economy was completely disrupted for moments there, and even now the other miner, the only remaining miner for the Soviet player, still is forced to stop mining, and the Empire player is now going to just try to move into this location, see if the Soviet player has revealed his other miner or not. But in my opinion, he's going to move his Tengus to this location when the tank comes, or indeed he can evacuate his Tengus away either via the air or indeed into the water. Keep in mind that most of the Empire factions units are amphibious, including their tanks, which are tsunami tanks that we are seeing on the field right here. And the Empire player, successfully drawing his opponent's attention away and doing some very good micromanagement here, is going to draw his opponent's main army at his own main base, and he's going to make a slow push with a capacity of reinforcements, and he's now going to pull back his 2 Tengus to rendezvous with the rest of the 4 forces to prepare for a wild push, I would assume. But I might be proven wrong though, because the Empire player doesn't really have much at the moment, and considering that the MCV can be used to force the units out of position, had the Empire player decided to attack at this particular moment, the Soviet player would barely have enough to hold it off, in my opinion, especially considering the fact that now the 2 refineries of his are back to fully functional again, and now he's erecting a crusher crane, which is very smart, because if he has to use his MCV to hold up his opponent's attack, he will most likely lose it. And if you don't have a crusher crane, you will have to rebuild your MCV, which is a pain in the ass, I might add. And the Empire player is just following up with tanks, continually reinforcing his army with more tsunami tanks, and indeed the Soviet player is using his MCV to try to crush the infantries and the vehicles of the Imperial forces. And so far, 1 tsunami tank and 1 Tengu has been crushed. And a tsunami tank just smartly rallying, just moving, sneaking to the backside of the expansion here, not the expansion, the refinery here, trying to attack one of the miners and delay the economy as long as possible, since now the Empire player does have the vision that his opponent's economy is very vital to his comeback. Because now basically the Soviet player doesn't really have any capacity whatsoever to make any sort of valid push that will bring him a decisive victory, while the Empire player's economy just roams free. However, I am quite surprised though that the Empire player is not abusing the mobility of his core's construction module and has not expanded behind that attack, that very successful attack that he did. Or the damage that he really managed to do was to trade army with his opponents, which is quite even in my opinion, well, in general sense, and he halted the mining of this particular miner for a while. It's just a short while, it's not really that much of a deal for the Soviet player to come back, and now he's going to attempt another push. This might cost him, because the position of the Soviet player's army was right here, so if the Soviet player decided to push out a counter-attack and use the MCV to defend against this force and trash the economy line of the Empire player there, he could be in big trouble. However, the Empire player is looking to make an all-in push here. He has sold his MCV for the sudden surge of cash, and is now going to be producing units at a very, very scary rate. And oh my god, does the Soviet player has enough to deal with this? I don't think so. He merely has a MCV, a Sickle, an entire Bullfrog, a few Pterodons, and 3 hammer tanks, and that is it. And look at this Imperial army. It's very, very scary, with 6, and I do mean 6 tsunami tanks and 2 Tengus for anti-infantry purposes, and mobility and absorption of damage there. And as you can see, the Leech is leeching away at a Tengu there, and not even managed to kill it. which is very unworthy, I would say. And one of the Sickles just sneaking around the backside trying to snipe off the indirect max angle, and did manage to do so, but really that wasn't much of a damage to them. However, the combination of the very heavy MCV and the freezing ability of Terradrone there could prove to be potent for the Soviet player to be against his opponent, and he has successfully crushed one or two tanks with this MCV. But in my opinion, I'm not quite sure it was quite worth it though, because now the Empire player's forces is still at the Soviet player's main base and is still pressing forward, and the Soviet player is just smartly erecting up a Tesla coil trying to hold off his opponent's attack by building up some static defenses, and it's going to continue the reinforcement of tanks, and suddenly he's staying at the last moment there, just supporting the Tesla coil one step closer to finishing, and bring out one more hammer tank to absorb more damage, and buying himself more time to come back to this game. And he's now just selling off whatever he can here, and he's successfully using his Terradrone to affect one tsunami tank after another, which is very effective. I would say that in terms of the efficiency of army, the Soviet player is way over his opponents, while our Empire player is trying to crush his opponent with brute force, which, with all due respect, is not very smart. And keep in mind that you are up against a Soviet, so he does have Terradrones, and Terradrones, as what they say on the letter, is very terrifying. It's a terror, obviously, and it's very cheap, so it's a cheap solution to hold off your entire attack, which, if they freeze you like so, in a very unpleasant location, you can't really do much, you can't continue with your push, and the rest of your tank are just doomed, basically, for destruction. And really, at this point of the game, I can't believe our Soviet player managed to hold it off here. That was a very scary looking Empire army, and the Empire player is now forced on 2 refineries and with no means of expanding it, while the Soviet player is actually very much the same. So I would say that the army advantage of the Empire player was evened out by the brilliant play of Soviet player here. Now the two players are on very even footings. They are both on 2 functioning refineries, and they're both on tier 3. They have an equal amount of unit production facilities. None of them can really make a difference at this particular point of the game, except maybe for the fact that during that attack the Empire player could have possibly stacked up a bit of cash, which will support his unit production cycle for a bit longer than his opponents. And since his opponent has to be efficient with his forces, and now I think he is staking up cash as well in order to reproduce his MCV, and just trying to apply pressure to the Empire player using Terradrones and slow down his opponent's economy as long as possible and delay the push. And oh my god, now the Empire player is just getting smart. He's going to use a Southern Transport, excuse me, a bit of a glitch there, Southern Transport to carry the engineer that appeared after he sold his MCV, and do a engineer rush, possibly looking to occupy this super reactor here, or even this war factory. It could be, it is certainly, well, could be. And while he's distracting his opponents with the 3 tank harassments at this side of the map, he could easily draw the tanks out of position, and indeed the tanks are out of position here. And if the Southern Transport was there and tried to deploy the engineer out of the location, but now the Terradrone has spotted this Southern Transport, and I'm going to freeze it away. It's that this Southern Transport is basically doomed, and the 3 Tangus was either destroyed or had to pull back from the 2 hammer tanks shouting power there. With all the regards, the Empire player is actually also doing a good job of slowing down his opponent's economy as long as possible, since he does recognize that